"You arrogant fool," my wife snapped, eyes full of contempt. She thought I was clueless, just some naive husband hanging on to a broken dream. What she didn't know was that I had already found the apartment lease in her name. I had seen the messages between her and her new man. She planned to leave me and abandon our little girl like we meant nothing. Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. For the longest time, I believed I had married the most elegant woman in the room. She was polished, charming, and always had the right words on her lips. Friends admired her. Strangers complimented her grace. Even my coworkers envied me, saying I had found myself a queen. And for a while, I let myself believe it. But what no one saw behind closed doors was the chill that crept into our home long before the fire went out. It started with the silence. Not the kind that happens when two people are simply tired after a long day. No, this was targeted, deliberate. Conversations began to feel like formal exchanges. If I asked how her day went, she'd nod vaguely. If our daughter ran to hug her, she'd pat her on the head like she was petting a stranger's dog. I wanted to explain it away. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe work was hard. But then she started disappearing for hours without explanation. Leaving me to cook dinner, clean up, and soothe our confused little girl with bedtime stories, I had to improvise on the spot. I still remember one particular night. I was up late, waiting for her. The clock had passed midnight, and our daughter had fallen asleep on the couch beside me. My wife walked in at 12:47 a.m., her heels clicking on the floor like they didn't belong in this house. She didn't say a word, didn't look at me, didn't ask about our child. She walked straight past us and into the bedroom, shutting the door like it was a line in the sand. Something had changed, and I wasn't blind anymore. I started paying attention to the small things. The way she always took her phone into the bathroom now, how she changed her passcode, how she always kept her screen tilted away. I'm not the snooping type, but when the peace of your home is on the line, when your daughter asks you if mommy still likes us, you stop being passive. I looked through the trash. I checked the back seat of her car, and that's where I found the first real clue. A pink envelope tucked under the floor mat with a handwritten note. Looking forward to the new chapter. Just you and me this time. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I began my own quiet investigation. I took days off from work without telling her. I watched. I waited. And every night, I tucked our daughter in while pretending everything was okay. The irony was cruel. The world still saw us as the picture-perfect couple. At our daughter's school events, my wife clung to me for appearances. At neighborhood parties, she laughed a little too loud at my jokes. But when we got home, her smile vanished, and her voice grew sharp. One night, as I helped our daughter with her homework, she pulled me close and whispered, "Why doesn't mommy hug you anymore?" That was the moment something hardened in my chest. I realized I wasn't just trying to save a marriage. I was protecting a child from the heartbreak of watching her family break apart. I began moving in silence, quietly setting money aside in a separate account, copying important documents, taking pictures of everything, text messages she left open, receipts she forgot to hide, even a spare key she left in her gym bag. The mask she wore was slipping, and I was done pretending I didn't see it. The night I opened her laptop, I didn't do it out of rage. I did it because my hands were shaking, and I needed the truth to stop whispering and start shouting. She had left it on the dining table, unlocked, careless, as if daring me to look. Maybe deep down, she thought I'd never have the nerve. But she underestimated what a father will do when his little girl's world is at stake. The browser history told a story. One I didn't want to read but couldn't stop myself from finishing. Apartment listings for one-bedroom lofts downtown. Forums on co-parenting and custody loss. Messages saved on cloud drafts, never sent, but written with a coldness that chilled my spine. He'll be fine. He's too proud to fight me in court. I just need to make it smooth for me and Dylan. Dylan. That name repeated across at least 7 email drafts. I found pictures too, him grinning on a rooftop bar, hand brushing against hers. One photo was taken just 3 nights ago, on the same evening she told me she was visiting her cousin who'd had a breakdown. She had been with him, laughing, wearing the necklace I bought her for our anniversary. I stared at that photo for a long time. Not in shock by then. I had expected it. But in reflection, this woman, the one who once whispered love into my ear while I held our newborn daughter, had been planning her exit like it was a vacation. Still, I didn't rage. I didn't shout. I closed the laptop and picked up my phone instead. Not to call her, but to call a lawyer. Quietly, discreetly. The man I reached out to was an old friend from college, now a highly respected family attorney. I told him everything. He didn't ask for proof. I sent him a folder titled Contingency. That same week, I found a small place in another neighborhood. Not luxurious, but safe and warm. I filled out the paperwork in my name only, and I made sure it had a room painted sky blue. Because my daughter loved to look up at the sky and ask questions about clouds. At home, I became more invisible. I let her believe I was spiraling, too sad to speak, too passive to care. She became bolder, staying out longer, making less effort to hide her contempt. One morning, over burnt toast she didn't bother to butter, she looked up and muttered under her breath, "You arrogant fool. Still think this is a marriage?" I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she had finally said what she truly believed. That evening, while she texted on the couch with her back to me, I was sitting in the kitchen with our daughter, helping her draw a picture of our new home. She didn't know we were actually moving soon, but she kept asking, "Will there be space for my stuffed bunny?" "Yes," I said. "There'll be space for you and Bunny and Daddy. That's all we need." The next day, I visited the courthouse. Quietly submitted custody petitions. Started transferring assets into protected accounts. She had no idea. She thought I was sulking. She thought I was broken. But every smile I gave her was loaded with knowledge she didn't know I held. At night, I laid awake not from grief, but from clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And she had traded hers for something that would never love her like a family does. By Friday, I knew the time was near. Her suitcase had moved closer to the front door. She had a hair appointment and manicure scheduled, signals of someone preparing to make an exit look glamorous. Let her think she's leaving on her terms. Let her think I'll crumble when she walks out. Because when she returns, expecting comfort, she'll find more than the locks changed. She'll find out she's the one who's been left behind. That Saturday morning, she hummed as she folded her clothes into the suitcase she had brought out 2 days ago. There was a calmness in her steps, the kind of peace only someone with no conscience can wear like perfume. She wasn't just leaving a marriage. She was escaping what she thought was a life of boredom, responsibility, and limits. And she didn't know the only thing limiting her now was time. She asked me casually if I'd be home that evening. I nodded, pretending to check emails on my phone. "Great," she said, zipping up the suitcase with a final tug. "I'll be heading out before dinner." I didn't ask where. She didn't offer. That's how far we had fallen, from 2 people building dreams together to 2 strangers sharing walls and air. But I already knew her destination. I had the address from her messages. I had the photos. I even had the date circled in my head. This was when she was going to test if she could leave me and come back unchallenged. To see if I would beg, plead, cry. Instead, I spent that afternoon with my daughter. We played board games on the floor, laughing until she forgot to ask where Mommy was. I told her that soon, we'd be living somewhere new. She clapped her hands and asked if it had a fridge with 2 doors. I said yes, because it did, and because she deserved that joy, even if her mother never came looking for her again. Before my wife left, she stepped into the living room, makeup flawless, dress ironed, and voice filled with ice. "You arrogant fool," she muttered again, barely looking at me. "You had every chance to fix this." I didn't flinch. Be safe, I replied softly. Take your time. She raised her eyebrow like I was pathetic. Then she walked out, her heels tapping a final goodbye. As the front door closed, I turned to my daughter and whispered, "Ready to go on our secret adventure?" She jumped up and nodded. Our bags were already packed. The car was loaded the night before. I had even stocked the fridge in the new place with her favorite snacks, yogurt, apple juice, and carrot sticks she never ate but always asked for. I had already signed the lease and moved our essentials in stages. School enrollment transfer? Done. Custody documents? Filed. Bank accounts? Split and protected. By the time my wife reached her secret rendezvous, I was unlocking the door to a quiet townhouse just a few blocks from her mother's home. Close enough for our daughter to visit family if she wanted. Far enough to never hear the word fool again. The first night in our new place was filled with stories and laughter. We didn't talk about mommy. We didn't talk about what came before. My daughter curled up on her new bed, sky blue walls, just like she wanted, and fell asleep hugging her bunny. And me? I sat on the couch, lights off, phone silent. I waited, not out of fear, but to witness the moment the lie fell apart. It came sooner than I expected. At 11:24 p.m., my phone buzzed. Where is she? Where are you? What is going on? The text came in like lightning. Then a call. I didn't answer. Then another. Then 20. But I wasn't being cruel. I was giving her what she gave us, silence and distance. The next morning, she returned to an empty house. I knew she would. She would come back expecting to find a man stewing in anger, a child waiting by the window. Instead, she found new locks, bare closets, and a cold absence that mirrored the one she had carried in her heart for months. When she finally called again, her voice trembling now, I answered. Where is my daughter? Safe, I said. With her father, the one who never stopped being there. She tried to bark orders, threaten lawyers, scream about rights. But I told her to check her email. Inside was a copy of the custody request, with her abandonment documented. Evidence attached. Everything ready. She hung up. That night, she didn't sleep in her new apartment. She slept in her car, outside the old house she had walked out of like a queen. But now, there was no crown. Only consequences. She came back the next day, just after noon, still dressed in the same outfit from the night before. Her eyes were puffy. Her makeup was faded. She looked nothing like the woman who had confidently strutted out the door less than 24 hours earlier. I watched her from my parked car across the street. She didn't notice me there, just like she hadn't noticed the damage she'd been doing for months. But now, the consequences were loud. She stepped up to the front porch and reached for the doorknob. Locked. She fumbled in her purse for the key, but that key had been changed. I'd hired a locksmith just hours after she left, and the paperwork was already filed to ensure the house remained solely in my name. She banged on the door with growing desperation. Knocked. Yelled. Cursed. She even tried calling neighbors, asking if they'd seen me or our daughter, but they all shrugged or turned away. I had told them nothing. There was nothing to tell. It was over. After 10 minutes, her confidence began to wilt. She sat on the steps, pulled out her phone, and tried calling me again. This time, I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. By the fourth call, I answered, not with anger, not with triumph, but with stillness. Where is she? Where is my daughter? She barked, her voice cracking. She's safe. With me? I said calmly. You can't just take her. I'm her mother. And you left her? I said. You left us both. You made your choice. There was a long silence. Then came the guilt tripping, the fake tears, the blame shifting. I was confused. I wasn't thinking. You were distant, cold, always so arrogant. I finished for her. That shut her up. She remembered those words. She remembered how she hurled them like knives at the man who had raised her daughter, who had carried the weight of their home while she played pretend in someone else's world. But what she didn't know was I had stopped bleeding from those wounds long ago. No, I was just done. You don't get to rewrite the past, I told her. You don't get to walk out. then walked back in like nothing happened. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made a plan, and I just happened to read it before you could finish executing it. She sobbed. Actually sobbed. She begged me to come outside, to talk, to work things out. But I didn't move. I watched her from the car, watched the woman who had once believed she held all the power, now sitting alone on a porch that no longer opened for her. Eventually, she left, but not before she called her mother. I didn't hear the conversation, but I saw the way she clutched the phone to her ear like it was the last rope out of a burning building. And judging by her shaking hands and tear-streaked face, the conversation didn't go the way she expected. Her mother knew. I had mailed copies of everything. The lease, the texts, the timeline. I wasn't trying to destroy her, only to remove her mask in front of the people she still pretended to fool. Her parents had doted on our daughter. They adored her. And when they found out their daughter had planned to leave that child behind like a used napkin, their support vanished. That night, my phone buzzed again. I'm sorry, the text read. Please let me see her. Please don't take her away from me. But she had already taken herself away from both of us, and she did it without hesitation. What I was doing now wasn't revenge. It was preservation. I kissed my daughter goodnight that evening as she curled into her new bed with her bunny. She was happy, unbothered, unaware of the storm outside our quiet home. And her mother? She was out there in that storm, learning the difference between leaving and being left behind. Over the next few days, her calls didn't stop. Morning, noon, midnight. Some were silent. Some came with sobs. Others carried demands that she tried to pass off as maternal authority. But the voice behind those calls wasn't the voice of a mother. It was the voice of a woman watching control slip from her fingers. I ignored most of them, not out of spite, but because peace has a volume that drowns out chaos. And in our new home, my daughter was laughing again, smiling without fear, sleeping through the night. Still, I knew she'd escalate. I knew she'd push back harder once she realized this wasn't a temporary tantrum. This was real. So I wasn't surprised when the legal papers arrived at my attorney's office 3 days later. She had hired a lawyer and filed an emergency request for custody. Claimed I had kidnapped our daughter. Claimed I was mentally unstable. It was laughable if it hadn't been so predictable. But I was ready. My lawyer filed a full response the same day, attaching the folder I had been building for months. Screenshots, letters, voice notes, the lease in her name, the date she left our daughter home alone while she met with Dylan. Every lie, every plan, laid bare. The court scheduled an emergency hearing. She walked in with a confidence I hadn't seen in weeks, dressed like she was on trial for a fashion award, not a custody dispute. But the judge wasn't interested in appearances. He wanted facts. Her lawyer spoke first, painting me as a resentful husband taking revenge through his child. She nodded at every word like it was gospel. Until it was my turn. I stood calmly, cleared my throat, and spoke, not for myself, but for the little girl who slept with bunny ears and asked for double doors on the fridge. I told the judge everything. How she'd left. How I discovered her plan. How her daughter was never in danger, only protected. Then I handed over the documents. The judge skimmed them. His expression didn't change, but my wife's did. First confusion, then panic. And then, as my lawyer played the voice note she had left on Dylan's voicemail, one where she joked about finally ditching the dad and the brat she broke, she stood up and shouted, said it was taken out of context, said she was being set up. But the judge wasn't moved. He simply leaned back and said quietly, "You voluntarily abandoned your child. And now you're asking for mercy, not for her, but for yourself." She sat down, silent, defeated. That afternoon, the judge granted me temporary full custody. She was allowed supervised visitation, but only after a full evaluation. Her lawyer tried to argue, but the courtroom had already shifted. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was just the storm that passed too late. As we walked out of court, she followed me to the parking lot. Her voice cracked. "I never thought you'd actually take her from me." I turned and looked at her, not with anger, but with finality. You didn't take her with you when you walked away. I just made sure she never had to chase after you. She cried. She pleaded. She even tried to guilt-trip me, asked if I was doing this to hurt her. But she still didn't get it. I wasn't doing anything to her. I was doing everything for my daughter. When I got home, my little girl ran into my arms and asked if I could help her draw another picture for her new room. This time, she wanted to draw just us. And I did. Because now, it really was just us. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. I stopped wondering where she was or who she was with. The house was no longer haunted by tension, no longer heavy with silence that screamed. It was just me and my daughter now. And somehow, that was enough. We built new routines together. I cooked breakfast every morning while she picked her outfit. I walked her to school and picked her up on time. We read books together before bed, laughed at cartoons, took silly pictures on my phone. We weren't healing, we were living, and I hadn't felt that alive in years. Her mother? She tried to stay relevant. She posted vague quotes on social media, pretending to be the victim of betrayal. She messaged mutual friends to pray for her, hoping they'd ask me questions. But they didn't, because once the full story came out, once people saw who she really was, those who had admired her charm now avoided her shadow. She did get one supervised visit eventually. It lasted 45 minutes. Our daughter sat still the entire time, clutching her bunny, refusing to speak more than a few words. When the visit ended, she walked straight back to me without turning around once. That's when I knew it wasn't just about custody. It was about trust. And she had broken something no court order could repair. Eventually, her text stopped. Maybe she got tired. Maybe Dylan wasn't the future she imagined. I didn't care. She became just another chapter in the book I was writing now, a chapter one didn't need to reread. One afternoon, my daughter asked me a question I wasn't ready for. Daddy, why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore? I knelt beside her, looked into her curious eyes, and answered with all the honesty I could offer a child. Sometimes, people forget what really matters. But you didn't do anything wrong, and I'm never going anywhere. She nodded. Then whispered, I like it better when it's just us. Those words stayed with me. They wrapped around every broken part of me and stitched something stronger. Because I hadn't just survived being abandoned. I had turned it into a foundation. One that held up not just my life, but hers. I started writing again. I'd always loved words, but gave them up when life got too noisy. Now, in the silence of our rebuilt world, I found stories worth telling. Stories of resilience, of fatherhood, of quiet revenge carried out not with cruelty, but with dignity. And one day, I printed out a framed quote and hung it above our front door. It read, "You don't need to slam the door, just make sure it locks behind the wrong people." I never heard from my ex-wife again after that final court date. I don't know where she went. I don't care. What mattered now was the little girl giggling in the next room, the one who no longer flinched at the sound of raised voices, the one who slept through the night without waking up to ask where her mother was. We were whole, not because she left, but because I chose to stay standing. And in the end, the real fool wasn't the one she insulted. It was the one who walked away from everything real. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more powerful real-life tales just like this. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. What would you have done in his shoes? Until next time, stay strong and stay true to yourself.